No.
Not officially.
Oh.
So what is happening? What is Gate 3?
Ladies and gentlemen, mabibi na mabwana, ni siku murwa sana, jua limetoka. Welcome to the Millennial Show. Today we have very young, brilliant lawyers who have achieved so much for themselves. And we want to hear their stories, we want to hear their journey, what they've done, and basically what they have to say about everything that happens in the legal circles. So I will invite my co-host, Mr. Karaoke, to take it over from there.
Welcome again to the show. We have Manwa to my left and Ribin to my far left. I think nobody can introduce you better than yourself, so let's start from Ribin. Just a quick introduction of who you are, and then we'll get into the serious stuff later.
Alright, thank you very much. As Johnson has said, my name is Ribin Ndori. I'm a partner at Ashitima Advocates. I guess for now that's good enough.
Yeah.
My name is Manwa Hosea. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a partner at Totwal and Manwa Associate Advocates.
Hey, Wakubwa, it seems I'm the only unserious fella here. Let's get to partner here, partner here, partner here.
Talk to your boss.
Now, I'm the only unserious fellow here.
Maybe it's time to be a partner.
That's true.
Yeah, so clearly I'm the only imposter here. Lakini haidhuru maji ya kunde, sindio? Tuendelee. Aya, Johnson.
I think we like to start with an introduction where you tell us about your pupillage experience, your undergrad experience. You can mention a few things about high school and primary school if you have a very good story. So Ribin, you can start.
Thank you very much, Johnson. The story is a bit long, but so let me try.
No. Don't
We have
shorten it.
We have the time.
We have the time.
It's a Saturday morning.
Alright, so pretty much, in terms of high school, I went to Moi High School, Kabarak. Then undergrad, I was in Moi University. So pretty much the high school experience is so far back. I don't remember a lot of details there. So let me stick to the details I remember. So undergrad was quite an interesting experience because that's at the time when I had always known I wanted to be a lawyer. But then that's the time now this aspect of wanting to be a lawyer really hit. Let's say the rubber hit the road, because I thought that now that I always wanted to be a lawyer and I have that passion, undergrad would be easy. It wasn't easy. It became, once the road started going, it became a bit tough. But then that's when I learned the aspect that law is not necessarily easy, but if you put in all that is required, then you maneuver through it. So maneuvered through undergrad. But then before I finished undergrad, I got an opportunity to work as a research assistant for Justice Sila Monyao, who was writing a book on criminal procedure. So that one also really gave me some good grounding in terms of preparing me into the profession. So the three things which actually were fundamental in my undergrad experience, of course, was the academic studies. But in addition to that was a heavy mooting experience, and also now that working with Justice Sila Monyao. So immediately after undergrad, I joined Hamilton, Harrison and Matthews. That was even before Kenya School of Law. So actually I didn't even take a break because we just finished. There was a month break. Just finished undergrad, month break, then joined Hamilton, Harrison and Matthews. So for them, they took us straight from undergrad. So you do, ideally you do your pupillage the entire period before Kenya School of Law, throughout the Kenya School of Law, and after the Kenya School of Law, because if they take enough time with you, then they can train you sufficiently so that by the time you're finishing Kenya School of Law and pupillage and you're being admitted, then you fit into not only the professional expertise but also the culture of the firm to be able to represent them. So joined the farm, then Kenya School of Law. That was another experience.
But 90s.
Yes. Luckily, I got the 9 Ps. So again, part of the experience of how it worked out was also that working experience, because I had already been exposed to an entire 6 months of what is expected in practice. And you know, actually the thing with all these steps, at every step you join in, like when I was joining HHM, I thought I knew it all. But then when you get there, you find you actually don't know. You don't know it all. You need to actually start relearning and learning some of the other things, but of course learning much more. So for that experience, then gave me a good grounding, which now to take on Kenya School of Law and knowing what is expected. Actually, by the time I was doing Kenya School of Law, I had never worked as hard as I worked that year. That year really knocked me out. It was one of those years like, wow, what have I gotten myself into? But I was already too late. It was too late to try and walk back. I was already in. Of course. There was gate C, then there was gate D.
There was a gate D.
There was a gate D. Gate D was the other activities after you left.
It was gate C.
No.
No.
Not official.
Oh.
So what is happened? What is gate D?
Gate D. So now once you done the gate C,
As you have gate C,
yeah.
Then get this the
It will depend now. So there's a crew that used to go to Rongai during the year. There's a crew that would go to Kano.
Yeah.
So it depends which crew you are with. And I used to try and fit in with both, so that you get both experiences. Yeah. So that
I was starting to get that idea.
Yeah. So then after that, I stayed at HHM. Was admitted as an advocate. Then, luckily again, I got awarded the Young Lawyer of the Year.
Tungoja.
Okay.
Tutakuja hapo.
Tutakuja.
Sisi tumesikia msee ni msee wa Moi. Ni mtoto wa Moi, Moi Kabarak.
Did you meet Moi?
Yes. Yes,
Ah.
I was fortunate to meet him a number of times. Also by virtue of the fact that he used to interact with the students a lot of times during other sessions, but mostly during the church service.
All like the senior Moi, not
Yes.
the younger one.
Yes.
Okay, so
When was the last time you called me?
Sorry?
Have you called me?
You?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Did you hear Moi?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Actually, his callback tone.
Siku gani nitasema kweli?
sawa, wacha tumalizie hapo kidogo. We're coming back for that.
Yeah.
Mano, I want you to take us through the similar experience from just like he had done. From maybe you have a memorable experience from high school, you can have a mention of it. Then undergrad, Kenya School of Law, your pupillage experience. Then yes. Also, we were in the same class with this guy. Same year, not same class. Same year. But
He was in Moi?
No,
Were you in Moi?
You
Yes,
okay, sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. My high school experience, even though it's back in the day, it's still live in. I remember my days back then, and I schooled in a village school called Kenyoro. I started with Nambaria Boys in high school in Kisii, and proceeded to. Things happened, and then I moved to another school, wherein I did my KCSE and joined my university, where I met my senior Ribin.
How many years ahead of you was he?
He was 2 years ahead of me, right?
Yeah.
2 years ahead.
Two?
So he mentored us actually. And we also went to the same church. We were SDA people. We used to attend at the same time.
That's what I'm seeing.
Today is Saturday.
And we had a great experience in Moi. So my experience in Moi University was great. Initial stage, you understand the first year in law school, the excitement and all that. And during our year, we joined two lots, people of 2010 and 2011 at the same time. I think it was across all universities at some point. So we were so many.
I remember. Since we used to eat for 2 years.
Yeah.
No, but what he's saying,
And then after us,
was it? No, I think
We joined.
Yeah, it was during because they collapsed that 2-year waiting period.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
to
the
1
time
year.
for the
Yeah.
transition
was
there were 2 lots that had to join together.
Ah,
Yeah.
So we were so many,
Yeah.
close to 600 students in the same class. So we had so many classes in the morning and the evening. It was a great experience to interact and to get to know people and to grow and to conceptualize the issues with regard to the study of law. And so it's during that period that I got to interact with other law students from other universities. We formed one of the famous societies called the Law Student Society of Kenya. I think for you owe it to me because it's during our time that we stopped the pre-bar exams, which were being introduced while we had already had finished undergrad. We were supposed to join KSL, and then they introduced the pre-bar exam.
did someone go to court?
Yes,
Yeah.
LSK.
You did?
Yes, the
Yes,
LSSK went to court.
yeah.
The Law Student Society of Kenya went to court through my predecessor, Kevin Mwiti, who proceeded and petitioned the High Court. We managed to get a judgment in our favor and join the Kenya School of Law without pre-bar exams. That doesn't mean that we didn't want the exam. We could have actually, if at all it was subjected to us, we could have still passed. I believe it's not as it was presented to us, because at the time we thought they wanted to limit the number of students joining Kenya School of Law, and so we thought it was being brought in a malicious way. But looking at it and what it has done, I think there was a reason behind it. But for us, it was unfair, for a reason that we were not aware of it.
Legitimate expectation.
Yeah, we had a legitimate expectation that after undergrad we will join KSL without any other exam and sit for the bar exams. So my experience at KSL is similar to yours and similar to everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, when you finish undergrad and you're joining KSL, somebody tells you, okay, all the best. Everyone it's a strange institution to date for reason that you meet so many people, but for a very short period of time. And that short period of time, you're under pressure to either attend lectures and catch up your matatu back to your humble abode. You are subjected to the group discussions, oral exam discussions, and there's so much that happens within a very short time that you might not enjoy the experience. When you leave is when you look back and say, this was quite an experience. So of course we had the experiences in Get C. I guess people have different experiences with Get C.
You went to Get C?
Yeah. I didn't go to Get C.
But someone had a Gate D. I think that's the highlight. I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of Get C.
I think everything at the Kenya School of Law is positioned deliberately for a certain reason. I remember during her time, one of the groups, one of the chairperson, how do we call them? The farm leaders, was out of anger because he lost the group's assignment. He was thrown into the pool with a suit. So the experiences in KSL were quite immense, and it's come to think of it, it's a rigorous process that prepares you to the market outside here. You can't fit into the market if you have not been modeled by what Kenya School of Law gives you as a young lawyer. So I think that was my experience. Afterwards, I got admitted in 2018 after I didn't pass like ribbon.
How many P's did you get?
I had 7 P's.
Hata mimi. So pia mimi niko kwa greatness.
I think 7 P's ndizo za kusema.
I had 7 P's, and then after the second sit, I passed all of them. So, I mean, the experience of failing, I usually tell them, and I know I have colleagues who have not been admitted to date. It's not about their intellect. I don't know what it's all about, and that is one of the things that people have never.
Like exposure,
And also luck a bit.
Yeah. It's all about luck, because I've seen very brilliant colleagues who've been subjected to, receipt and receipt, and you see, those are the things that we as young advocates need to address, so that our young people who are in campus, who are in Kenya School of Law, at least can have hope, or rather, we can have a system that actually takes in and doesn't frustrate. The system as it is, it seems like it's frustrating you, it's discouraging you from doing law. We want a system that brings people together, not one that makes people feel empty or feel like they're not worth. We have lost so many young advocates to those who fail exams and harm themselves. We've had those experiences before, so we need to change. We need to have a discussion as to
And depression,
what, matters depression and what we need to do, because I think the society doesn't care about non-members. But if you look at it, young advocates who are not admitted as advocates are actually our young ones. They're the future of the society, and therefore there is really need to have a conversation on those issues. So that was basically my experience. It's been 3 years of practice as a young advocate, and I think I'm now qualified as a commissioner for audits, and I believe yourself too. So because of the period, so
Come see.
yeah. So that is basically my experience as an advocate so far.
Yeah, we'll pick up the conversation from there. I think something that has come up, and I think we discussed this even with our previous guest, in terms of the experience at KSL and what you're taught at KSL and what you face when you now get into employment. Do you think there's a disconnect, and what do you think can be done? Maybe we can start with Ripia.
Yeah, actually, it's good you've started from there, because it's something I had also picked. I realized I didn't capture Manuel speaking. There is a disconnect. As I mentioned, part of the reason, of course, there's a huge element of luck that I got those 9 Ps, but the other reason was actually the 6 months that I spent at, actually the 1.5 years, because I spent 6 months before Kenya School of Law at HHN, and then while at Kenya School of Law I was still working the entire period. So what really helped was that practical experience I gained at the firm, in terms of understanding what is expected of you in the market. So, and now when the disconnect is coming, and actually that's something very real, I believe there's a disconnect between what is presented as what you're supposed to understand is expected of you and what is actually tested during the exams. Of course, the content is the same, but the intensity of the rigorous and the thoroughness with which you are expected to interact with the material to prepare, and the output which is expected of you from the exams is actually very, very, very different, because what they expect from you in the exams and the output is actually the sort of market practice, because you see, they're preparing you to come out to the market to address those real issues, and that sort of addressing the real issues is what they're expecting of you to answer during the exams. But then what you're given during the class sessions still doesn't really reflect that rigorous. So I actually think I would have failed those exams had I not had a session where someone took us through the marking scheme for the previous years. Because then I looked at the marking scheme and I was like, wow, this is the kind of rigorous and standard which they expect in the answers. And if you look at that standard and but of course I understand the lecturers at that point think you're adults and you really need to do that thoroughness, but there ought to be that communication and guidance that, guys, we are not going to give you everything in this class. It's actually an obligation after here to go out there and do more and understand this, because there has to be that delicate balance. Of course, at that point you're an adult, you know these things, but also it doesn't hurt to communicate to someone that what we are giving you here is the guidance. After here, go out, read all these things, understand these scenarios, understand it even more than that theoretical aspect, because what we expect you now to do in the exam is sort of apply these things in a practical aspect the way you'd have actually applied in the exam. So I actually think, had I not had that sort of firm experience, And that interaction of seeing someone who took us through the previous years, how they were marking the exams the previous years, then the outcome would have been much different, because those two really opened up my eyes. I was like, wow, what they're expecting is much higher than what you'd get from what is being issued at that point. So absolutely there's a mismatch, and we ought to find a way as to how to blend that mismatch. But having said that, there's also the practical aspect of KSL is not going to be able to cover everything in terms of the practical aspect, because in practice some things inevitably you can only learn them through practice. There are some things which you can never be taught, no matter how that person is good. So we have to have that delicate balance to ensure that at least the aspects which can be learned are learned properly, and the guidance is given to at least remind the student. I mean, at that point you're an adult and you're expected to know this, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded at that point, like, guys, this is the standard. It's very high. It's much more than what we can give you in this class. Go out there, read more, interact with practitioners, understand more in terms of the practice, because that's what we are testing. But even after we've done this is just the foundational aspect. There are some things, no matter how good we are, can only be learned in the practical aspect, in the actual doing, which you now do within your pupillage period, another interaction in practice. So there's that mismatch. A lot more can be done, but also think practically. I understand that there are some things which cannot be done in class, but can actually be done throughout that period. Perhaps maybe it's a discussion of seeing if that 6 months pupillage is actually enough in terms of that practical aspect, and how it can be balanced with the 12 months which you spend in class after you've actually spent 4 years in class. I would actually think then we'll be focusing more on a longer period of pupillage and reducing the instruction period to give someone more practical interaction before the exams.
And if you flip it the other way around, like for example, you have the pupillage first. Like after campus, immediately after campus, you go to pupillage. Then you go to KSL. Do you think it's going to help?
I think it would help. I actually think it would. In fact, I even think that 6 month period should come before the exams, because in the exams they're expecting you to handle these things practically. If you've just been in class the 4 years and then you're in class throughout that year for Kenya School of Law, and you've never been to a farm, you won't have that practical aspect to practically interpret your mind into that. So I think it would help. Actually,
and I think it's been done before. I think there are guys who used to first work for 6 months and then go to KSL.
Those are some of the proposals that are being they're making right now. It doesn't make sense to go for pupillage after the exams. Why don't we have a structure where you start with pupillage, as you say, you flip it. That experience can now, because essentially in KSL what they test is about the experience you have had in practice, what you can do about that experience. That is what they want in the exams. But now you do an exam, then you go to get that experience. So I think we can, if we have it start first. I think I did my pupillage at State Law Office. I mean, it's arguably one of the biggest law firms. It's the biggest law firm.
It is really.
In the country.
No doubt.
Because of the departments and because of the work they do. My experience there was very nice, and I wish I could have had it before I sat for the exams. I don't think I could have, it couldn't have been an issue to answer those questions. It's most probably pass. But we have a society. We as members, members of the law society, once we pass the exam, we don't remember.
Kila mtu akubali na hali yake.
Which is a very bad.
There's a whole month before you get to
If you tell someone, let's do something about these students who are going to KSL. Let's do something about the structure. It needs to be reviewed. It's been there for a while. We have advocates who never went to KSL. Very senior, who do not understand and may most probably not appreciate the trouble that one goes through. Us having gone through the process in our recent years, we need to actually be the people seeking for revision of that curriculum, so that we have people get the experience even back in campus. Of course, every university has its judicial attachment process, but there's nothing much you learn in court. Because what you come to see in court is two parties who are arguing. Most probably not see the experience that they have individually. You have to go through a law firm. I worked as an intern during my second year at LW and company advocates. She taught me how to go about the practice of law, how to approach, how to attend court, and it was very instrumental in my growth as practice. We need to have at law firms adopt interns, people who are in the kitchen in the undergrad, first year, second year, to actually have law firm experience, have courtroom experience from a law firm setup, because that is the exam generally. Because when you go to Kenya School of Law, they, as Ribin said, they assume that you ought to know these things.
Yes.
And as a student, when I look back, I also wish I could have been told that this is what you need to learn. I could have actually capitalized on that. So we need to look at that and see how we can actually ensure that the system doesn't eat its own children. The system doesn't, people don't get scared of doing law because of the hurdles, so that we now ensure that even the numbers of people who pass it at a particular time will tremendously change.
So, just a moment, just to keep on adding to that point.
Yeah.
This guy was my boss, where I was working for PPH. And he never taught me.
Was I a good boss?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, we are here together. There's a reason why we are
Talk to me
together.
directly.
Yeah. And he never taught me. No, I'm just
Yeah.
putting a leg. But anyway, adding on what he has said and what he has said,
Yeah.
what do you have to say about people who are going to put to try and put a point that we are a generation that is very entitled and we don't really want to work hard as they worked. What do you think in terms of connecting what Manu has said and what Ribin has said?
Where do I start? I think first, after interacting with very many senior lawyers,
Yes.
there are some things I have come to pick over time.
Yes.
I am faster than them, and the guys who are leaving school now are faster than me.
Yes.
They have more information, they have more sources. Apparently, the place where I worked first, I used to work under someone who told me if they needed to research,
Yes.
they had to dedicate a whole day
Yeah.
to go to Milimani
Yeah.
and just sit down there, look at case law and all those things. Then over time, we came in. We have what is it called? This Kenya law. We have Kenya law, so I can look for cases. Nowadays, I think people now have WhatsApp groups. If you have a question, you just throw it and you get all the answers you need from someone who has done it before. But having appreciated that, I think, in my opinion, I think there's a continuing dwindling in work ethic as we go on, because I have been in practice for 5 years officially, but 7 unofficially.
Yes.
And the amount of work we used to put in at the point at which I came in, at some point we even used to translate. I don't know if you knew that.
Yes.
At the point you came to KN.
Yes.
We used to translate. If a transaction had to be closed, we used to work the whole day, the whole night.
Yes.
Then the next day you get a break because the document is being reviewed elsewhere. Make sure you're back. By the time it's back, you complete.
Yes.
And then after that, of course, with the flexibility of a modern boss,
Yes.
you're able to get some few hours off or a few days off until the next transaction comes in.
Yes.
Continuously, I don't know if it's politically correct,
No, you don't have to
but people nowadays, they know their rights. They know their rights. They know they should work between 8 to 5.
Yeah.
If you find a person nowadays who's working extra hours, that's a different person. It's a person who is breaking off from the flock.
Yes.
So that's what I saw. So if you're asking me whether over time people have become lazier, I wouldn't say lazier.
They become smart.
They have become smarter,
Yes.
and they've also gotten to a point where their individual rights and their equation of what they're getting versus what they're giving has become a more pronounced aspect of employment. As opposed to where we came from.
mingi. But you can simplify it.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, we can.
Nowadays someone can tell you, yes, you've employed me from 8 to 5.
Yes.
I came here at 8, it's 5.
Yeah.
Boss, kesho ni siku ingine. During our time we couldn't. Okay. I couldn't say that. I don't know about you.
You see, I mean, I've never felt comfortable enough in any situation to ever say that.
Yeah.
Because thing is, I agree with that to some extent, but I'd like to add something.
Yeah.
To that I think we still have a crop of people in our generation who are going all out and putting in all that.
Yes.
The only difference, I think, our generation, there's so much exposure on our lives,
Yeah.
so that all these other aspects are also being, a light is being shown on them, so that they're being projected. So I wouldn't say it as much as that it has increased. I think there's a lot more much exposure towards the aspect of the category of people who just want to work between 8 to 5 and leave it at that. But the guys who still want to go beyond that to deliver are still there, and they're still pushing. In fact, right now there's some younger people I work with, even in the office, and you see how they're pushing themselves and how they're coming to this generation. You're like, wow, these guys, give them a short period of time,
Yeah.
they take us out of the game. And I guess that's there's that continued progression, and the advantage which each generation keeps having after the other generation is the access to information. Like you see, our generation right now, we've been exposed to two very important things. We've been exposed to the global standards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right now, we've been exposed to the global standards and to the tools to enable us to actually operate at global standards. Very few generations ahead of us had that kind of exposure, and to actually be able to do it with a lot more ease than the generations ahead of us are able to do that. So, in every generation, there's going to be an aspect of both, but at the end of the day, is delivery being done? Are you delivering on what is expected of you? Because even me, right now, the people I'm supervising, I'm not so much about how much hours you're spending on something, but are you delivering? Yes. Are you the kind of person who's willing to put in the hours it will take to deliver that? I'm not going to tell you I want you to take 6 hours on this. That's really on you. If you can take 1 hour and deliver, I'm very happy with it.
Yeah.
If it's going to take 6 hours to deliver, then put in those 6 hours and deliver. And
12, 18 hours.
Exactly. If it's going to take 12, 18 hours, we still pull in those all-nighters. There are days you go deep into the night the next morning because there's that deadline you had committed to, and you need to deliver that. And that aspect of that global exposure is both a good thing and a challenge for our generation. Because as a generation now, especially with the clients we're dealing with, this is a client who has dealt with lawyers in New York, has dealt with clients in London, has dealt with clients, client has dealt with lawyers there. So when they're coming to Nairobi, they're expecting the same standards. And we have to deliver those same standards. Because even us, we are exposed to those standards and we know what is expected. And we actually have the capacity to deliver that. So it's both an advantage and a challenge, which as a generation, if we are able to properly capture it, would actually propel us up much faster than the generations that came before us.
Let me pick a conversation with Manuel on that. First of all, just talk about what you think work-life balance is. But then also talk about your expectations and whether a person who gives in more time, gives in more enterprise, has higher chances of rising faster than a person who does not do that.
Okay, I think work-life balance is, as a young lawyer, to be very truthful. Work takes away our lives.
Yes.
We could, back then in KSL, in campus, we had all the time to ourselves. Hang out, go for social events. Nowadays, you can't. You have, in my capacity as an advocate and the work that I do, I don't even have time for myself. Most of the time, I'm in court. If I'm not in court, I'm in a client meeting. If I'm not in a client meeting, then I'm sleeping. Or preparing another court matter under certificate that I need to file. So you end up finding out that your social life is in your office. We make our offices our home because 90% of our practice is dependent on you as a person, not on the person who's working for you in the office, not for the associate or any other person. It's you. If you screw up a client brief, the buck stops at you. You're the one to get the consequences. And so we put in a lot of work. And I speak this on behalf of so many young advocates and those, of course, who are getting into practice. There is need to put more time on the practice or the profession than on the social aspect at the tender years of practice. This is the reason why. There is an entire lifetime for you ahead of you that you will have after you've established yourself to have a social life. So I think it depends on the age in practice. Ribin right now, he
has some balance.
He has some balance.
At least you're dressed casually on a Saturday. Yeah, you're always
He's always in
so
So sometimes, like, we are seated here with their clients calling, asking, where are you? I have to meet you. You have to meet them. You have to. We are in practice because of them, and therefore they take much of our time, both private and official time. But it's for a cause. It's not for. It's for a short period of time, because the process of establishment takes a lot of input from a person, discipline, sacrifice. Sometimes you don't even see. I know for a fact there are even seniors who because of the discipline they have and the kind of work they do, they transnight. They do the work at night. In the morning, they ensure that they meet the client needs. So it's very difficult to balance at this age. I don't know about seniority, but I think the more years you finish, the more years
they come to us.
Yeah, the more years you practice, the more work you get, and the more occupied you become. And so it's a delicate balance. But I know there are those who have mastered the art, and we are learning. So probably we learn from them how they balance. On the issue of the input that you have on a particular matter and whether it benefits you, I think as a young advocate, you can see the fruits of your practice by how your client reacts to what you have already done. And I think success doesn't come easy, especially in practice. I'm sure all of you are lawyers, you understand. The more disciplined you are, the more time you put, the more you grow yourself, generally. And so there is a big difference between someone who sits and expects that things will work out, vis-a-vis someone who works for what they want. So it's obviously you will that person who works hard and puts in extra time.
Yeah.
There is fruits at the end of the road, and you can see them. So I think it's any young advocate, for you to succeed, you have to ensure that at least you put in the hours. I came to realize that what we do in campus at KSL is not what practice is. Practice is a different profession altogether. It's like that now what you got in campus was just the basic. You were being taught how to walk. So that now the real walking in practice is a marathon, and you have to keep up. If you don't keep up, then you're thrown out. As Ribin has said, there are so many changes in practice. If you're not up to date, if you don't read more, they say 10 judgments, like Steve Obola says. But I don't think reading judgments alone will make you a smart lawyer.
Yeah.
You have to balance practice, because it's not. The practice of law is similar to politics somehow, because essentially you have to be up to date as to what is happening at the same time, and ensure that you know which laws have been passed. Otherwise you'll end up embarrassing yourself in a court, and you'll end up losing a brief. So the more time you put, I think, the more you learn, and the more success you get.
Sasa, you guys, we dragged you here. Oh, you guys, today we are at a different location. We're shooting at the alumni. So we dragged you here, and it's something we can't afford not to talk about. You won the first edition of the Young Lawyer of the Year. No, then you won the second one.
Yeah.
Then he's the chair for the Young Bar Association. And I'm the guy who makes all this happen. Anyway, anyway, I want you to tell us your experience from the nomination, winning, and whether it has opened doors for you. Yes. And maybe what you would tell another aspiring young advocate.
Yeah.